Hello, my name is Yannick Dillen, Professor of Entrepreneurship at Vlerick Business School, and today I have the honor to be standing next to Greg Marsh. Greg is an entrepreneur, investor, and senior lecturer at Harvard Business School, so an expert in entrepreneurship as well. We're going to ask Greg some questions about startups, about the process of entrepreneurship. What advice would you give to first-time founders these days?
It is going to be tough, and I think the markets for early stage capital financings are getting much tougher than they were. Just anecdotally, I've seen venture capital firms being much more discerning about growth round valuations and being much more selective about the businesses they choose to finance, which means essentially that there's going to be a very difficult proving ground for first-time founders in particular, but even proven entrepreneurs. That said, history tells us that many of the most successful businesses were built during periods of economic challenge. Businesses right the way from Amazon to many other successful companies survived those early difficult years, those lean years, and had to develop the same competencies of frugality, of ingenuity. And ultimately, there are still investors writing checks. One of the bizarre experiences of this market is that while the public market valuations have fallen, there's an enormous amount of capital still in the hands of limited partners and general partners. And so, look, Mark Andreessen's firm and Ben Horowitz's firm just closed a $4.5 billion investment fund for cryptocurrency investments at precisely the moment that those investments are unfashionable. The returns on that fund might end up being extraordinarily good because the companies they do choose to invest in will have an empty field to win.
And how long do you think this downturn can last? Looking back in history, what is something that is common, let's say?
The advice that investors are giving their portfolio CEOs at the moment is make sure you have enough cash for at least a couple of years of operation, because it could well be that for the next 6 to 12 to even to 18 months, investor sentiment is sour. And the reason sentiment matters is investors are humans, they're people, right? And if they've had a negative experience, if some of their companies are struggling, if they're having to use their resources to prop up businesses that are in distress, they're going to be that much more distracted and that much less focused on new business inception and new business investments. So make sure you have enough cash to survive the really tough sentiment downturn. As the markets start to improve, and they will, they always do, it might take 6 months, it might take 18 months, as they start to improve, that's going to be a really interesting time for the better businesses to raise cash and to scale.
So a big theme with scaling up, I would say, is, okay, how does this role of a founder or co-founders, how does this role that they play changes? Sometimes they say, okay, you start and you quickly become a manager, then you maybe become something else. What is your advice on that? How do you look at this process of entrepreneurs that change roles when their company is growing?
The hardest challenge for many first-time CEOs, founder CEOs, is that they've never learned how to be a CEO. Unfortunately, that's not a job you really get taught how to do. It's a job you learn how to do, and sometimes you learn the expensive way, which is by making many mistakes. If you're lucky, you've got a supportive board. If you're really lucky, you have great co-founders who can help give you that feedback and help you feel supported in your journey as a chief executive. But this is a very bumpy ride for most people, and if I reflect on my own experiences, I made a lot of mistakes. Now, having said that, not every founder chief executive is going to remain the founder and chief executive throughout. They may remain a founder, that often sticks, but they may well hand over the reins. And some of the most successful founders give over responsibility for the day-to-day management of their business to somebody else as it becomes larger and more successful. In a way, it's a sign of success. If the business is large enough that you can bring a professional manager in to run the company, it's begun to institutionalize. And eventually, we all want companies to institutionalize because that's what makes them survive our departure from them and become independent and autonomous in the world, like children leaving home and going to live their own lives. So it's something to welcome, but it's also something that many founders and first-time CEOs are scared of. And so what I can say is make sure you get really good mentors around you. Make sure you have, as I said before, supportive board members who can help you on that journey. And make sure that you continue to read those management books and continue to think about yourself as a professional manager. It is not the same skill as founding a business, but it is a good skill to have as you get older and more experienced.
And at what stage would you advise it? Rather sooner than later, I guess? Or?
For many investors will say that the best person to run a business is the founder of the company, even if they're not the best chief executive on paper, because they have a moral authority in the business that they build. And so for as long as you're enjoying it, for as long as you feel you're effective, stick with it. But recognize that as a company comes to have 100, 200 employees, if you're successful on that journey as a business, the skills that are required from you and of you as the leader of a company of that size are very different. You have an opinion about product, but you don't actually get to have an individual contribution role around product. A lot more of your work has to be done through other people. A lot more of your impact on the business has to be indirect and influential rather than hands-on. And that is a difficult transition for many people. Some people make it and some don't.
A lot of countries are countries of traditional SMEs. What can those traditional SMEs learn from startups, young, bright firms with an ambition to grow very fast?
I think there's things to learn on both sides. I don't think it's a one-way street. One thing that, let's call it the American capital model of early stage venture capital financed businesses gets right is a relentless focus on the quality of the people. The difference between a good business and a great business is all in whether the people who work there are the very best they can be. Now, really good businesses also have distinctive cultures. They also have really high quality training programs. They have the ability to attract and retain those really talented people. So it's not just that you get good people and pay them a lot and expect them to do great work. They have to have meaning and purpose in the work that they do. But I think if there's one lesson which, let's call them more traditional SMEs, could take from that American venture capital model, it would be, what does it take for you to hire and retain the truly astonishing people, the best graduates from universities, the best engineers, the ones who could go and work in the technology sector in Google or Facebook and bring them into your business? Think hard about what you could offer them, because the answer is they may well value a lot of the things they could learn from your environment, but you will learn a lot from them if you can bring them on board.
Greg, you have been investing in a lot of companies in the past. You're still doing this. What is for you the one thing that you look at when you are investing in a startup?
It's people, which is the obvious answer. Now, of course, I want to see that there is the potential for a large market. I want to see that there's a product which meets a need. Ideally, you want to see some early traction or validation of that product market need. But those for me are hygiene factors. The thing that actually gets me excited always and always will is seeing really good people. And if I look at one of the things I've done from an investment perspective is I've followed the careers of some of the folks who worked at One Fine Stay. You know, that alumni group, that diaspora has gone out and built some fantastic companies. My co-founder Evan has just capitalized his business for it in New York. Sten Saar heads the firm Zego, which is valued most recently at nearly $1 billion. There are about 5 or 6 other really successful companies been founded out of the founding and early management team at One Fine Stay. Why? I know those people, they're great people, and I'll follow them wherever they go. So more than anything else, it's the people. And if you see a really, really great individual who passionately believes in what they're doing and has the wind in their sails, it's a joy to help them. And sometimes it succeeds and sometimes it doesn't.
It can be young people, let's say 20 years old, with a great idea, with a great passion. They don't have to have that track record before them, or?
Look, track record is a catch-22 because, yeah, on the one hand, you want people who've been there and done that. But someone who's no longer hungry is a disaster. So they've got to have a hunger, they've got to have a fire in their belly, or they're not going to run hard, and they're not going to make the hard trade-offs, and they're not going to put the extra hours in. So, of course, you want someone who's young but not too young, experienced but not too experienced, hungry.